The throne room erupted in laughter. The galaxy's greatest rulers were mid-feast, mocking Earth legends, dragons, demons, gods. Then, the chamber doors groaned open, and a man walked in. He was smiling. 15 seconds was all it took for the Imperial Throne Hall to forget how to breathe. One heartbeat, the place echoed with arrogant laughter, alien nobles jeering about primitive Earth stories. The next, the laughter strangled into silence as the heavy doors creaked open. A figure in a simple black suit, hands folded politely behind his back, stepped across the marble floor. The stranger smiled, and every creature present felt as though the myths they had mocked had just come alive. The throne room of the Zorati Empire was designed to intimidate lesser species. 50-foot ceilings arched above, lined with obsidian columns veined with gold. Enormous banners of conquest hung between them, showing planets reduced to ash and fleets shattered in fire. The galaxy's most powerful rulers lounged on crystal thrones, draped in silks, dripping in jewels, secure in their dominance. Humans, of course, were supposed to be extinct, an irrelevant footnote in history. That's why the nobles mocked Earth's myths as tavern humor, comparing them to ghost stories meant to scare hatchlings. Monsters of fire and wing, one noble sneered. Such fragile bipeds, believing in demons and gods. Pathetic. Pathetic, yes, another chimed in, raising a jeweled goblet. Though their creativity amused me. Imagine a creature called a dragon. A lizard that breathes fire. Adorable. The room erupted with laughter. Until the doors opened. The man who entered was unremarkable at first glance. Medium height, dark hair slicked neatly back, suit pressed with understated precision. His shoes clicked gently against the marble as though he were walking into a conference room rather than the court of galactic rulers. He carried no weapon, no guard, no entourage. And yet, every alien present stiffened. Their instincts screamed danger. The Emperor himself, a towering reptilian being with emerald scales, leaned forward, his golden eyes narrowing. "And who," he rumbled, "dares breach the throne of conquest unannounced?" The man stopped at the base of the dais, hands still clasped behind him. His smile never wavered. "Good evening," he said softly, his voice perfectly polite, perfectly measured. "My name is Mr. Gray. I represent Earth." The silence was absolute. A dropped feather could have been thunder. Finally, a noble burst out laughing. "Earth? Dead Earth? The dust ball consumed by its own wars? Impossible." Gray's eyes flicked toward him, calm, almost amused. "Yes," he said, "I hear we've become quite the bedtime story. That's why I'm here. To clear a few misconceptions." The nobles chuckled nervously. But the Emperor did not. His instincts, honed over centuries of conquest, screamed that this was no ordinary envoy. He tilted his head. "We were just discussing your myths," the Emperor said slowly. "Amusing little fables about dragons, demons, and warriors. Do you claim them true?" Gray's smile sharpened ever so slightly, polite as a razor's edge. "Not true, no," he replied. "Merely instructional. Myths are humanity's way of telling outsiders what to expect, should they ever forget their manners." A ripple of unease spread through the room. One of the nobles, a slug-like dignitary with jeweled tendrils, scoffed. "A threat? From a lone human fossil who wanders into our hall? Shall we tremble, then?" Gray turned his gaze on the slug-like noble, and for the first time, his smile faltered, not into anger, but into something worse. "Pity. You misunderstand," he said quietly. "I don't threaten. Humans rarely do. We prefer demonstrations." The Emperor rose, his massive claws curling over the arms of his throne. "Enough games. If you represent Earth, prove it. Show me you are more than a ghost in a borrowed suit." Gray tilted his head, as if considering a polite response at a dinner party. "As you wish." He raised one hand, slowly, deliberately. No weapon. Just 5 human fingers extended toward the air. The room's torches flickered, shadows twisting. A cold wind slithered through the chamber though no doors had opened. And then, the banners of conquest ignited. One by one, the great silken trophies of alien victories burst into flames, fire devouring alien emblems as though the very air had turned hostile to them. The nobles screamed and scrambled back, their jeweled goblets shattering on the marble. The flames roared high, then died instantly, leaving nothing but charred threads falling like ash. Gray lowered his hand. His smile returned, faint but undeniable. "Your empire is fond of trophies," he said softly. "So was mine. The difference is, we learned to stop hanging them on walls." The nobles were pale, trembling. Some whispered of sorcery, others of hidden technology. The emperor's claws dug furrows into his throne, but his voice stayed steady. "You've made your entrance, human. Why have you come?" Gray's eyes gleamed with quiet amusement. "Because, Majesty, mocking humanity's myths is unwise. We don't tell stories to entertain. We tell them to prepare." He stepped forward, and the hall seemed to shrink around him. Dragons, demons, gods, creatures that burn, devour, and rule the skies. Do you think we invented them from nothing? Or do you think, perhaps, they were warnings? Records of what we once hunted, and what we learned to become. The silence was crushing. Every noble stared at him as though expecting wings to sprout from his back at any moment. Gray stopped a few feet from the emperor's throne. His voice lowered, smooth and sharp. "Tell me, Majesty, do you know what humans call a throne room full of complacent rulers who laugh at myths?" The emperor's golden eyes narrowed. "What?" Gray's smile widened, almost kind. "A buffet." The laughter that followed was human, his and his alone. Quiet, measured, cutting through the hall like the whisper of a blade before it strikes. And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy's most powerful rulers felt like prey. The throne room smelled of oil and incense, two scents that had no business being together. High pillars carved with alien runes rose to the vaulted ceiling, each etched with the victories of the Vare Dominion. At the far end, Emperor Koresh lounged on a hovering dais, eyes glowing faintly gold as he regarded the human who dared walk into his sanctum uninvited. Adrian Locke, Earth's so-called special envoy, didn't look threatening. He wore a crisp black suit instead of armor, his shoes polished to a shine that reflected the torchlight. His hair was neatly combed, his smile relaxed, his hands folded behind his back like a man waiting for a train. But his very presence radiated a quiet wrongness, like a shadow that refused to obey the light. Koresh leaned forward, his voice a low rumble. "Human, you walk into the Hall of Conquerors unannounced. Do you know how many species have knelt here before me?" Adrian's smile warmed. "Well, judging by the decor, I'd say at least 12. Possibly 13, though the statue in the west alcove looks more like a participation trophy than a conquest." The court erupted in hisses and clicks. Several alien dignitaries twitched their tendrils, scandalized. One particularly pompous reptilian ambassador snapped his jaws, the equivalent of laughter mixed with outrage. Adrian gave a polite half-bow. "Apologies. I've been told humans have a bad habit of speaking their minds. Consider it cultural flavor." Koresh's lips curled into something between a grin and a snarl. "You think this is amusing? Humanity is a speck. A myth-spinning backwater barely clawing itself into orbit." "True," Adrian replied smoothly. "And yet, here I am, standing in your throne room. Without chains. Without guards. And you haven't had me executed. That says something, doesn't it?" A pause followed, tense as wire. The alien nobles shifted uneasily. The emperor studied Adrian, searching for cracks in his calm mask. There were none. The mockery of myths. A squat, feather-crested alien stepped forward. Counselor Drekthar, historian of the Vare, spread his clawed hands in mock pity. These humans cling to fairy tales. Dragons, demons, warriors of fire and shadow. Their myths are proof of primitive minds, terrified of their own night skies. Adrian chuckled lightly. "Funny thing about myths. Sometimes they're warnings dressed as bedtime stories. Sometimes they're blueprints. He let the words hang, soft and unthreatening, yet razor-sharp to those who listened closely. Blueprints for what? Another dignitary scoffed. Survival, Adrian replied simply. His tone was calm, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of steel. Alien curiosity. The court was divided. Some aliens sneered openly, certain this human was nothing more than a curiosity. Others leaned forward, antennae trembling, sensing a storm beneath his words. One slender amphibian ambassador croaked nervously. If humanity is so fragile, why march into danger willingly? Why not remain hidden on your little world? Adrian smiled again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. Because predators that hide too long become prey. We learn to step into the fire, not away from it. Myths taught us that much. The Emperor tapped his clawed fingers on the armrest, golden sparks crackling faintly between them. He was growing impatient. Yet curiosity gnawed at him. He gestured lazily. Continue, human. Entertain us with your little campfire stories. Tell us why the galaxy should not erase you. The Parable of Fire. Adrian paced slowly, hands behind his back, speaking as if he were lecturing a classroom instead of addressing a throne room of conquerors. On Earth, we had a saying, don't play with fire. Sensible advice, yes? But humans, we didn't listen. We burned forests. We scorched fields. We nearly burned ourselves out of existence more times than I care to count. Yet, fire never scared us for long. We learned to tame it, shape it, turn it into engines, weapons, cities. He stopped, facing the Emperor directly. So when you mock our myths about dragons breathing fire, perhaps you should ask yourself, what kind of species takes the monster's weapon and makes it their own? Silence followed. Even the torchlight seemed to falter. Several aliens shifted uncomfortably. Some tried to laugh, but the sound came out forced. Others whispered in low tones, translations flickering through comm devices. The human wasn't boasting. He was stating history as if it were inevitability. A polite threat. The Emperor finally spoke again, his voice tinged with menace. You presume much. Do you think your words frighten me? Adrian tilted his head politely. Oh, not at all. I wouldn't dream of frightening you, Your Excellency. He leaned in slightly, voice dropping so the court had to strain to hear. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't curious how long your fleets would last if they discovered they'd been fighting a species that learned war from its bedtime stories. The words slid like silk, but the undertone was unmistakable. A threat wrapped in courtesy. A knife hidden inside a handshake. Koresh's eyes narrowed, but his posture stiffened. The room felt colder. Reactions of the court. The reptilian ambassador clicked his jaws nervously, his earlier arrogance fading. Surely this is bluff. No race so young could wield such power. Adrian turned his smile on him, pleasant and unyielding. You're right. We're not the oldest, the strongest, or the fastest. We're the ones who never stop coming back. Knock us down, and we write songs about it. Wipe out a city, and the survivors will carve your defeat into stone before the ash cools. That's not strength, Ambassador. That's humanity. For the first time, several members of the court looked uneasy, not at the Emperor, but at the human. The first crack. Koresh waved a hand, though his eyes never left Adrian. Enough riddles. State your purpose, envoy. Why have you come here? Adrian clasped his hands behind his back again, posture relaxed. Simple. To deliver a message. Humanity isn't asking for permission to exist. We're informing you we're already part of this galaxy. You can accept that gracefully, or resist and discover why our myths always end with the monster falling. The words rang across the chamber like a bell. The Emperor's lips curled again, but this time the smile seemed strained. He leaned back on his dais, pretending indifference, though his claws dug into the armrest. He had invited a guest into his hall and found himself measured instead. Closing the encounter. The torches flared brighter as if to break the tension. Courtiers shifted nervously, their earlier laughter gone. Adrian gave a courteous bow, as though he had merely concluded a business presentation. "Thank you for your time, Your Excellency. Humanity appreciates your hospitality." His eyes flicked briefly toward the great doors. "And your security protocols. Very informative." With that, he turned and walked away, calm, unhurried, as if he had delivered nothing more than a polite greeting. The throne room's silence followed him like a shadow until the doors closed. Only then did the whispering begin in frantic bursts. Some voices trembled with anger, others with fear. None could deny it. The human had left more questions than answers, and that was far more dangerous than an outright threat. Emperor Koresh stared at the closing doors, golden eyes narrowing. For the first time in centuries, unease gnawed at him. Because in that polite, smiling envoy's words, he had heard the echo of something far older than humanity should have known. The throne room had become less a symbol of power and more a crucible of silence. Every alien noble sat stiff in their jeweled seats, waiting for someone, anyone, to explain why an Earth myth now stood alive in their hall. The myth paced like a guest inspecting the wallpaper. Clad in dark attire threaded with subtle silver, he looked deceptively ordinary. That was the danger. He tapped a finger on his wrist console, seemingly unconcerned with the phalanx of armed guards whose weapons tracked his every move. "Your High Council is very theatrical," the human finally said. His voice carried the casual authority of someone who had already measured the exits, the guard rotations, and the exact angle of each weapon aimed at him. "I almost expected a smoke machine. Shame. Humans do love a dramatic entrance." Laughter broke from no one. Instead, High Chancellor Zurich, his scales glittering in nervous irritation, leaned forward. "You claim to be, what? A story made flesh? Do you expect us to bow before a human fairy tale?" The human, Elias Grant, though he hadn't yet offered his name, smiled with the softness of a teacher correcting a child. "Fairy tales? No. Humanity has myths because we remember. We write warnings into bedtime stories. We turn survival manuals into legends. And we wait." A murmur rippled through the assembly. Several ambassadors exchanged worried glances. "Wait for what?" asked a Krylith envoy, her antennae twitching. Elias stopped pacing and fixed her with calm eyes. "For the galaxy to underestimate us. It never fails." The words were delivered like an after-dinner remark, but their effect was an earthquake. The guards shuffled. The chamber chilled. Admiral Korvek, a war-bred giant from the Korth Dominion, slammed his clawed fist against his armrest. "You come into our chamber with riddles and smugness. Do you think your kind frightens us? You are scattered primitives, barely holding on to your ruined homeworld." Elias tilted his head, amused. "Funny thing about primitives, Admiral. They tend to invent fire first. And then, when everyone else laughs at the smoke, they invent something better. Do you know what humans invented after fire?" Korvek bared his fangs. "Weapons." Elias's grin widened. "No. Patience." The pause that followed was suffocating. Every species in the chamber knew the humans had been quiet, too quiet, since their supposed decline. Ships had vanished. Colonies had gone dark. And now, one of their myths walked in as if summoned. High Chancellor Zurich waved a jeweled hand. "Enough parlor tricks. State your purpose, human. Why have you infiltrated this chamber?" Elias finally bowed slightly, as though humoring protocol. "I was invited. Your scholars kept debating whether humanity's legends were propaganda or warnings. You asked for proof. I thought I'd settle the argument." "By appearing?" scoffed a Neuroki philosopher, his translucent skin trembling. "No," Elias said, voice sharpening. "By reminding you that humans never bring only one piece of the story." The phrase hung ominously. The delegates began whispering rapidly, translations crackling in every language across the chamber. One envoy, smaller than the rest, broke the chain of fear. Ambassador Rhysis of the Valari, a species old enough to know the weight of omens, leaned forward with solemn eyes. He speaks truth. My archives hold records of similar encounters. Humanity has always hidden teeth behind a smile. The other delegates turned on him instantly. You're suggesting this is no coincidence? That Earth conjured this apparition? They're extinct, diminished, irrelevant. Elias lifted a hand, silencing the chorus with nothing but the gesture's audacity. I appreciate the debate. But while you argue whether I'm real or symbolic, the trap you've walked into tightens. The guards bristled. Weapons clicked. Xeric hissed. You dare threaten? Not threaten, Elias interrupted smoothly. Inform. Your fleet's outside this capital world? They're already seeing distortions. Ships failing to respond. Signals eaten alive by static. Curious, isn't it? The chamber erupted into chaos. Councils scrambled for their comms. Holographic feeds flickered on the walls, showing glimpses of fleets surrounded by shimmering distortions. Elias clasped his hands behind his back, strolling as though he were narrating a museum exhibit. Humans wrote myths about monsters under the bed, shadows in the forest, voices that could not be trusted. They weren't warnings for children. They were rehearsals. We built them into culture so deeply that when the time came, we'd know how to become the monster. Admiral Korvek snarled, rising to his towering height. If this is human sabotage, you'll find no mercy. Mercy? Elias chuckled, finally locking eyes with him. Admiral, mercy is the last luxury we gave up. The words struck like a blade. At once, the hologram stabilized, not into static, but into a single image. A fleet, massive and ancient, decloaking beyond the alien armada. Ships unlike any design known in the galactic registries. Predatory. Silent. Bearing insignias that hadn't been seen in centuries. Human insignias. The council chamber froze as if carved from stone. Elias finally gave his name. I am Elias Grant. Diplomat, tactician, historian. Pick whichever title soothes you. But understand this, humans don't tell myths to entertain. We tell them to warn. You laughed at our monsters. Now you've met one. Silence swallowed the throne room. Some aliens looked horrified, others awed. A few, calculating. Xeric whispered, voice cracking, "What is it you want?" Elias turned toward him, smile razor thin. Want? Chancellor, you misunderstand. Humans stopped asking for things when you buried us under treaties and pity. We stopped wanting. Now we're here to collect. And with that, the throne room's great doors slammed shut on their own. The throne room no longer echoed with laughter. The last joke had died halfway in an alien throat when Marcus placed the relic on the polished obsidian floor. A hush followed, thick and trembling, as the golden wolf-headed staff pulsed with a low, predatory glow. Impossible, whispered the Chancellor of the Ilvari, his translucent gills fluttering in panic. That is not a story. That is a myth, Marcus interrupted with a casual smile. Yes. You've all told me that about 20 times today. Strange thing though, Earth's myths tend to have an inconvenient habit of walking into throne rooms uninvited. The staff hummed louder, its head lifting slightly as though sniffing the air. The aliens shuffled back instinctively, pressed by a dread they couldn't rationalize. The Emperor forced his voice to steady. Human, you are reckless. You cannot frighten us with artifacts and shadows. We command legions, fleets, empires. You are a diplomat, nothing more. Marcus chuckled, soft and polite. Diplomat, yes. Nothing more. He tilted his head, like a teacher humoring a slow student. Ah. See, that's the mistake every predator makes when staring at something they don't understand. They look at the smile and forget about the teeth. The wolf head snapped its jaws shut, a sound like thunder rolling across the chamber. The walls themselves shook. Panic erupted. Several guards raised their plasma pikes, but none dared step closer. Marcus dusted his sleeve as if the quake was an inconvenience. Allow me to put it plainly. Humanity didn't stumble into your empire. We weren't lost sheep who wandered too close to wolves. We came here knowing exactly where the den was. And we brought a leash. The staff responded, beams of light shooting outward, carving runes into the air. Ancient sigils burned across the throne room walls: wolf, serpent, flame, storm. Symbols echoed in countless human myths. Every alien present recognized them. Their oldest legends, etched into their bones, returned in full color and undeniable reality. The Emperor tried again. Tricks. Parlor illusions. Marcus's gaze turned steel-hard. His voice dropped, stripped of humor. If this were a parlor trick, you wouldn't feel it clawing at your spine. And they did feel it. Every alien in the chamber, no matter their physiology, no matter their sensory organs, felt the same thing: prey. A general of the Akrari finally snapped, slamming his clawed fist against the marble. This is psychological warfare. Nothing more. Kill him and end this charade. He lunged. Marcus didn't flinch. The staff moved on its own, wolf head igniting in white fire, jaws clamping shut on the general mid-stride. In less than a heartbeat, the Akrari was gone, reduced to ash that scattered across the floor. The room froze. Marcus exhaled, almost disappointed. That was unnecessary. But I suppose every story needs a demonstration. He leaned slightly on the staff, as if it were just a walking stick. Now, shall we continue the conversation, or should I let the myths finish it for me? The chamber descended into chaos. Some shouted for retreat, others for reinforcements. Yet none dared advance. The Emperor, trembling now, tried again. Why reveal this now? Why come here with one relic when you could have? Oh, my Emperor, Marcus interrupted, voice silk over steel. You think I brought one? The throne room's grand windows darkened. Outside, above the city of spires, the sky ignited with 1,000 streaks of light. Human warships, sleek, black, each bearing Earth's insignia, tore from folded space like wolves from tall grass. The Emperor's face collapsed into disbelief. You had a fleet hidden here? Marcus's smile returned, sharp and amused. Fleet? No. Myths. Every weapon you dismissed as fairy tales, every monster you laughed off as primitive superstition, we didn't make them up. We buried them. We waited. And now, he spread his arms wide, staff glowing brighter, we've brought the stories back. One of the elder counselors finally broke down, falling to his knees. We mocked you, he muttered, trembling. We thought your myths were children's fables. But you hid them. Not hid, Marcus corrected softly. Guarded. Until the galaxy grew arrogant enough to need reminding. Above, the fleet began to unfold its power. Vast silhouettes resembling dragons of flame and titans of stone moved alongside human warships. Beasts half real, half machine, myths given flesh and steel. The city below erupted in screams. Marcus turned back to the Emperor. Here's how this works. You will surrender your fleets. You will dismantle your empire's war machine. You will remember that humanity's smile is not permission, but warning. Do this, and we remain diplomats. Refuse. He gestured casually with the staff toward the ash pile that used to be a general. And the stories take over. Silence. Heavy. The kind that weighs on lungs. Finally, the Emperor whispered, voice raw. What are you? Marcus leaned in, speaking so only those closest could hear. The thing you laughed at when the fire was low and you thought the dark was empty. He straightened, smile polite again, businesslike. Now then, shall we draft the terms of surrender? The throne room held its breath. Aliens stared at the human, charming, smiling, utterly in control, and realized with horror that the joke had always been on them. For the first time in galactic history, myths weren't stories. They were orders. And humanity had come to collect.